back. Yeah, I think speaking at every ng-conf just pretty much means I'm getting old, but such is life, you know, it's gonna happen. So we are gonna talk about a feature that, it's almost like a meditation feature for me, because anything I could do in my apps where I can just like go, simplicity, I'm all for that. How many maintain some pretty big monstrosities at work? Anyone? Lots of fun, right? Monstrosity might even be a nice way of saying it for some of you. How many folks have any people joining your teams that are expected to contribute quickly and maintain? Anyone have any like new folks lately? Okay, another example. So we're gonna be talking about something called control flow. And the nice thing about this talk, how many were here last year? Real quick, show of hands. Okay, so last year, for those that weren't here, I decided to do this AI communication demo, and I called my wife live, and there was a lot of people, a lot of online, I think it was about 1,000, and I accidentally showed her phone number to the whole world. We are still married. I literally have had at least 5 people ask me. And I'm happy to report that today, we're not gonna do anything like that. So I have no chance of screwing this up. Well, I could screw up the talk, but at least I won't screw up the marriage, hopefully. So let's dive on in and talk about this a little bit. So back in about 2010, I've been around for a little while in this business. We used to use a lot of server-side code for templates that had a less than, greater than with a %. Anyone do this back in the day? Lots and lots of brackets, right? And there was this technology that was released, I think it came out officially in about 2011. It was called Razor syntax. And when it first came out, like anything, you're kind of used to the old way, and you're like, I don't need this new stuff. I like my old way. And you'll notice that it's very clean though. You have the little @if and then else if and else, and then you can embed your tags. Really nice. And it took a little bit of time for it to grow on me, I'll have to admit. But once it did, I loved it. And I've used it kind of ever since when I'm using this framework. Now you might be going, what's that have to do with Angular? Well, some of what you see here is about 14 years later. Also looks pretty similar. See, it's different, you'll see, but pretty cool. So if I can get the clicker to move, there we go. We're gonna talk about this control flow, and I know some of you have done it, because I've already talked to several people yesterday and today that have already migrated pretty big apps, it sounds like, to use this new syntax. And before we jump in, the reason I had the show of hands earlier is I'm all about simplicity. Like I said, it's like, simplicity. Because I've done so many years of maintenance of apps that's one of the very first things I look for from an architecture standpoint, and also from just the framework standpoint. So we're gonna look at some things that some of you have done, I know. Some of you probably haven't seen this though, that is now available to start using. And we have an @if, okay, kind of like that other thing I showed you, a switch, and a for. I'm literally gonna do a talk on if statements, switch statements, for loops. Like, wow, Dan, how that's gonna be so exciting, right? Yeah, thank you. It might be the simplest talk I've ever given, but also the most, powerful talk I've ever given, because of how it can really clean up, at least in my opinion, your templates. I mean, I really think the team has just done an amazing job on what they went with here. So let's start with conditionals. We've all used this, the good old ng-if, and I don't know if we have any new Angular developers in here, but I'm sure when you saw the asterisk in front of it, you went, that makes total sense. Like I see all my attributes, have an asterisk in front of them. Now for seasoned Angular developers, we're so used to it, you don't even blink, right? It's just how it is. We know it's a structural directive. It's just how we do things. And we know that'll pull things in and out of the DOM, based on this case, if this array has some length to it. Now, the new way will look like this. This is the after. So you'll notice, @if. Now, first off, notice that if you haven't seen this before, you don't have to put this on any tags anymore. You can put it wherever the heck you want, including inside of tables, which is nice. If you've ever done an ng-content before, just so you could have a place to put something, you don't have to worry about that with this. You put it wherever you want. You'll notice that inside of that, the brackets, what we call code block, we have our tag. Very simple. Now, if you look on the left and the right, it does the same thing. The one on the left is still going to continue working. So is it really worth it? Well, let's keep going here. Let's talk about why I think it is. How many maybe have an else if and maybe another else if and a else and those type of things? Pretty common, right? Now you may switch to a switch. We'll talk about that. But if you want to stick with an if statement, we can now do something like this, right? You don't have to do the magical named ng template if that's the way you used to do it. Or what I often did was just made another ng if that did the inverse condition. How many have done that? Because you're just like, no, I'm not typing the pound stuff, right? I see I have someone over here who, I'm trying to say this nicely, folks, but let's just be honest, I never liked it. And obviously I think we agree. So now you can do if and else if. It's not elif or L with no space if. It's normal. It's just like you would do in JavaScript. Else space if you want it, parentheses, and then your brackets. Super, super simple, which is why I love it. Because now if I have to jump into a template and maintain this, I already know what I'm doing. I hope. I think we're all pretty good at if statements and switch and things. Now, here would be an example of just breaking it down with an async pipe. It's a little bit of a difference compared to what we did before. So you'll notice we have this customer dollar. In this case, we'll assume that's some observable that we have. And notice we have a semicolon right after that, and then we can alias it as customer. And then you'll see in the div that now we can use that alias. No surprise there. We've been able to do aliases for, forever, pretty much. Really, really nice and clean, though, and really easy to use. You just have to remember that the syntax is slightly different than you might have used before if you did an ng-if. Now, what about switch blocks? Now, these were never a favorite at all. Because if you're like me, I don't use switches every day. Very unique scenarios where I need them. But I'd always have to remember, is it switch case, star switch case, star ng switch case? Because I just didn't use it enough to always remember. It works great. In this case, we're going to bind the ng switch to some animal property. And then if it's a dog, we're going to output that. If it's a cat, we'll output that. Really simple, right? Well, here's what it looks like now. And hopefully you look at that and go, oh, cool, it's kind of like JavaScript, because it is. It's basically an inline version of it. Notice it is a little bit different than others I've used because you do put the @ symbol not only in front of the switch, but also in front of the case. And then notice at the bottom we have, the default. Very standard, very easy. I don't have to have container tags, nothing like that. I could just use the normal control flow syntax. Super cool. All right, now the next one up is what about loops, right? And towards the end here, I just had a conversation at lunch. Minko was chatting with me real quick about this, and he goes, have you seen the performance on a particular scenario? And I'm like, no, please do share. So you're gonna see that chart. It got added about 30 minutes ago. But before we get there, let's just talk about loops in general. You're all used to this. ng-for, I'll have to admit, I always liked these. I thought they were nice and clean. It was one of those things that if you jump between libraries or frameworks, some of them duplicate what's in the tag, and some of them duplicate where it's on the tag, and you had to remember which is which. And luckily in Angular, though, it just obviously duplicates the TR. Real simple. Now, this is what it looks like with the control flow syntax. @for, you don't have to put the let now. You could just say cust of whatever it is, filtered customers in this case. Now notice the track there. I know a lot of you have used track by, right? That's been around literally since forever as well. But it was always kind of optional. Now, I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything about other libraries at an Angular conference, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So how many also have some React apps you have to maintain? Anyone? I'm sure there are some. I do. And those that have done that world will know that when you loop, you have to put a key, all right? And the reason you do that is because from a DOM standpoint, if we're gonna be deleting an item, or updating, or adding, or whatever it is, we need to know the unique identifier so the DOM can pick out just that one little sliver and not have to re-render the whole bulleted list, table, whatever it is that we have. Well, now you need to put the track. Okay, so you have to put the semicolon, track, and then give it some unique identifier. Don't give it the object. Yes, every object has its own little signature, if you will, but you want to give it something specific, of course. And I think most of the time we're going to have something like ID, possibly, there. Now, the challenge always comes up with loops, though, is what if it's empty? What do you do? Right? So, a lot of times in the Angular world, you'd use an ng-if, and then you'd use some of the other syntax to compensate. But now, when we bind this and we have the track by here, we can just add an empty block. That's it. And now if that array is empty, it can just automatically fall back. And notice that where I'm doing this, I purposely selected a table because I think tables are making a big comeback, folks. I'm kidding. But we still have columnar data, right? So I chose this because in another demo I'm going to show you in just a moment, how many have struggled where, okay, where do I put this stupid thing? I need this TR to be the action item. I need something to wrap it. And then you come up with like ng-conf or something like that to, compensate, if you will. Well, you don't have to do that now. You can just embed the control flow syntax right in with the HTML in the table. You don't need placeholders or content things like we used to do. You could just do it like you would expect, nice and clean. So I'll show you an example of that here in just a moment. Now, before we move into the demos, I'm gonna give you a sneak peek. There is a way to help migrate to this, but we're gonna come back to that. So let me jump over here to some samples. Well, actually, let me do this first. So if you go to the new angular.dev site, which hopefully you've all seen, I really like it, actually. If you go down to docs, because if you're like me, you'll remember this for the next 20 or so minutes, and then at 30, it's like the midnight clock struck and I forgot everything. So go to template syntax in the docs, and then go to control flow. And this has everything that I just am going over here, right? There's an example of, let me zoom that one more. There's an example of an else if, for example, right there. But I want to point out with for, there's the example of the track, and they explain it, but I want to also show you that these items, contextual variables that most of you are probably used to, you might want the index, you might want the count, you might want, is this the first, is it the last? All those types of things that you see here, you can also use as well. I'll have an example of that in just a second when I jump to VS Code. So that is also all available with this control flow syntax. All right. Now, I want to kind of do a before and after, and I'll have a link to this repo for those that are really new to this and just want something actually that you can load and ng-serve it and all that fun stuff. It's a real simple project. It's not hello world, but it's not super complex. So you'll notice right up top, I did the way I admit I don't love, but some people do it, so I went ahead and did it. And I used that little else block here for a name template. And then notice, we have our ng-if, we have our async, we alias it, all the normal stuff you've seen, right? Nothing really special there. Now, what would this look like, though, if we convert it? It would look like that. All right, now there's that semicolon I talked about earlier for the async pipe to separate it. Now I can use the alias. Okay, but I can also have else statements, else if, all the normal stuff. Like I said, it's like super simple, but it's really nice once you know about it. Now, in addition to that, I didn't have a great use for switch, so I just put a little quick demo here. Notice in this case, I'm gonna do the async pipe. We'll check the nullability of it and get to the city if we have one, and then case New York, case Phoenix. I just write out a comment, but obviously you could put tags, you could put components, you can do whatever you want here. Very simple to use. So this is like the world's most, like I said, simple talk I've ever given, but I love it because all my new stuff is going to this because it's just so much easier. Now let's go back to the kind of pre-version. You can, it turns out, put an ng-for on a table and it's smart enough to figure it out, but you might do this instead. You might put an ng container, and then you have your ng-for, you have your async pipe, all that. Now notice I have two loops though, right? I'm gonna loop through the orders, and then once I get through the orders, I'm gonna loop through the order items. Now you could argue maybe I do that somewhere else in a service and I just get it ready. That's fair. But then I couldn't show this demo. So, won't say it's always real life. So let order item of order items, and then notice this let is odd equals odd here. Okay, so we're gonna get, is it an odd or even row? And the reason I'm gonna do that is just a real simple add a class, remove a class. The odd class here that you'll see right there. Okay, now what I don't like about this is, well, I don't like this. In particular, the rest of it I don't mind, to be honest, but here's what it looks like now. So take a look at that right there. Look how clean that is. Like I can just do my loop, I can do my other loop, and again, ignore the fact that yes, I could pre-process this before the view even sees it, I realize that. But notice I also have a track on each of these, and I'm now saying $odd. Okay, I want to get to the odd row again, assign that to a context variable is odd, and then we have the class.odd right here. Really simple, super nice. All right, so that is the basics of what control flow is. There's a little bit more we're going to talk about, but that's kind of what it looks like from a high level. Now, if we go back, I mentioned when I have a kind of a side project app I'm working on right now that it's big enough that I wish I would have known about this, but it wasn't ready yet when I first started the migration. So this is a schematic that you all can use to actually have it take a kind of a first stab at, I want to convert from direct structural directives over to control flow. So if you run this in your project, I'll show you an example of this right here. It will actually go in and try to do it. Now, it's not a mind reader. It's not perfect by any means, but it's way better than doing it by hand because you can fix up what it doesn't do right pretty easily. So let me show you an example of that. So I already ran this just in the interest of not tempting the demo gods today. Luckily, there is no phone number around here though, so I'm good. I'm sure my wife, she literally, by the way, we went to the airport and she, bye. She goes, do not show my phone number. So I'm not lying. And I bet you when I call, she's gonna be like, how'd the talk go? You didn't show my phone number, right? Anyway, so here's the schematic. When you run it, what it's gonna do is say, all right, what's the path to the project you wanna migrate? Now, I was in the root of the project, so you can see I have the /. It filled that in. Should the migration reformat your templates? Now, this can move things around a little bit, so you may or may not want that. Experiment. That's what Git's for, right? You don't like it, just revert. Go back. In fact, I could do that right here, and you could see what it was, before, but this is what I'm gonna go with. You hide that. All right, now, in this simple example, there's only two files to update, customers and orders. So let me open this real quick, and we'll just slide this down. Now here's what it did, and it's not perfect, because look what it did with the for. Two kind of mess ups here. Number one, it wrapped the table, that's not what I want. Number two, look at the track. It's referencing the full object. So obviously I would need to come in and get to my ID. And luckily, if you have the Angular language extension installed, if you forget to do some stuff like that, when you mouse over it, it'll actually tell you, for loop must have a track expression. Okay, so we'll put that back. Too far. All right, and then we'll just use the little hotkeys here to move things down. That is not the hotkey. That's the hotkey. And this one looks pretty good, except we need, I think it's ID or something like that. Oh, I think it's ID. And then we need to move this guy up because, as you saw, it kind of put it outside of the table. But there we go. I mean, it's little fix-ups like that you would still have to do, but not a big deal. Now, let's scroll on down here, or up. Notice there's an if statement. That looks pretty good. There's where it wraps. Now, look at this. It didn't do an else. It did another if. Now, you may or may not like that, right? That's where we get to have job security. We can go in and fix it up. But this is where I could come in and do, else if, some other condition, put my brackets, and you could just do it right here in the template. Super, super clean, don't have to have any IDs, none of that kind of weird stuff that we used to do. So I would probably change that to an else, but it's good enough. Now let's look at this last one here. Okay, so if we go here, it looks like inside of the table, it converted a 4, and that looks pretty good because it's outside of the head. It's right above the TRs I want to repeat. Again, I'd have to fix the track. That's kind of obvious, so we'd fix that. It has another if statement, and then look at the if statement here, what it did. I mean, that would work, but again, you probably could just do, it looks to be the opposite if I'm reading that right. So we could probably go with an else or something like that, or an else if we need to, right? But that's what's so cool about this is it's really clean, really, really clean. Okay, so that is what this schematic will do. So if you have a bigger project, this would definitely help you at least get started and not have to do everything from scratch. So check that out if you're interested. Now, the last thing I want to show you is, well, I have 2 more things actually. So we've seen the if, the switch, and the for. Like I said, the world's most exciting talk ever. Dan talked about if statements. Woo! There is one more that I was kind of told some other talks were going to have this, so it was sort of banned from this talk. This is super exciting, though. Has anybody tried the new @defer block in here? Okay, we got a few in here. This is amazing, check it out. I'll show you real quick in the docs. I think I have it still. So if you go search, literally I just went to the search right here, and I searched for @defer. There's a whole section about what this is. In a nutshell, if you would like to lazy load, defer load, but it's way more than that. You can do it based on where they scroll and the view and all that fun stuff. You can add this @defer block, and what it will do is automatically chunk out that component so that now it can be loaded kind of on demand here. Now, you can certainly do this without it, but you'd have to write a little bit of code. It's not that much, but still, who wants to do it if you don't need to, right? So if you haven't seen these, definitely go check it out. That's all I'm allowed to say before they kick me off, because there was another talk apparently that had this. But this is a very exciting, I've been using the heck out of this everywhere. So it's really, really nice. All right, now I mentioned I saw Minko right as lunch started actually. And we were just briefly talking about this, and he goes, have you seen the performance chart? And I'm like, well, I did see one from a blog post a while back, but I haven't seen anything recently. So he was nice enough to share this with me. And there's a link here at the bottom. It's a little bit long, I realize, but I want to point out where, well, the arrow is right there. The rest of these are pretty comparable. The column in the middle there, Angular CF, control flow. The one on the right, ng-4. Okay, so you can see it's pretty comparable, create rows, replace, partial, but look at swap rows. Swap 2 rows for a table of 1,000 rows. Look at the difference there. I mean, it's like a massive difference. So yes, there are some performance benefits as well to moving to this. And there's even more that I couldn't fit it in one slide. So definitely check out this link when you get some time. You can just go search for this kind of bottom one. I don't even know, I think I can say it right. Crossest, I guess, crossest. But anyway, very, very good stuff there. So With that, I hope that gives you a good idea about what control flow is, how you can change your templates now, and the general process for your ifs, your switch, your loops. Super simple, folks. I love it. I think it's going to be great for our maintenance down the road. And with that, I'll move on to the next one. Thanks, folks. We'll hopefully see you next year.
Thank you so much, Dan. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. All right.
I got a few dirty looks when you started to mention defer, but I think you're good. Kept it short enough.
And I forgot all about the phone number incident. I forgot all. I was like, oh, that did happen.
Forgot because she didn't.
All right. We have a sponsor session now by ng-conf.
We do.
Yeah?
Yes, from ng-conf. We're going to hear from them. They're one of our sponsors. So please give a warm welcome to Steven.
Come on up, Steven!
Thanks for having me, guys. Hello, everybody. First time at ng-conf. Thanks for having me. Do you know, I talk to like 10,000 people at work on Teams, and I don't blink an eye. And 500 people in a room is absolutely terrifying me. So bear with me. Look, very quickly, as I've got 2 minutes, ng-conf, you've probably never heard of us. And I realize that I'm probably in the wrong state as well. I should be next door. We are one of the largest sports betting and interactive gaming companies in the world, it's true. In the US, you'll know us as BetMGM, probably. In Europe, you'll know us as bwin, and in the UK, you'll know us as maybe Ladbrokes and Coral. And frankly, we're absolutely everywhere. So, look, let me tell you a little bit about me. If we go on to the next slide, please. Well, oh, there we are. So I'm the VP of Engineering, and why am I here? We have about 2,000 engineers, believe it or not, doing various things, and we have about 500 Angular engineers, and everything that touches the customer, all our front ends, all our tills in the shop, absolutely anything you can imagine that's front end is Angular. So we really care. And, you know, shameless plug, if you're interested in performance, if you're interested in Angular architecture, we're always hiring. So do not hesitate to reach out. And let me tell you about what we've done in the last 18 months on the next slide. So look, performance and developer experience. Very one of our biggest problems 2 years ago was performance. We really struggled. And we've been working with Pushbase, Michael, Julian here. These guys, wonderful. And they have helped us, you know, deliver these improvements. Not just LCP, but CLS, IMP, they've all had a huge jump. So massive thanks to them. And I just wanted to point out, if on the right, the DevX, maybe you don't know, but this is actually, there's so many X's, NX, right? This is the dashboard, and we have many front ends. We've gone from sort of a 45-minute build time down to 5. Everything they said earlier today is absolutely true as far as I'm concerned. And honestly, moving 500 developers to NX, non-trivial, but we did it super quick with their excellent support, and I can only recommend them heartily. And very finally, to finish, look, a big thank you to the community, a big thank you to Google, to the Angular contributors. Honestly, 18 months ago, can I say this out loud here? We were a little bit scared whether we'd made the wrong choice with Angular, medium to long term, that it just wasn't going to serve us. And I saw that keynote yesterday, performance, developer experience, stability, and I was like, yeah, do you know what? You have delivered. And the deferred views is going to take that LCP to the next stage. So a big thank you, and thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it.